My name is David Schottenstein. I am 31 years old, and I live in Belle Harbor, Florida. I'm here today to talk about my experience, my personal experience with JCW, the Jewish Community Watch, what it's done for me, what it means to me, and why I think this organization is as important as any other organization anyone's considering, whether it's from a financial assistance perspective or from a giving of your time. I think people have certain questions / misconceptions about JCW, and I wanted to share my own personal story, which I think may help answer some of those questions or any doubt that someone might have in their mind about the validity of the work that the organization is doing. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, very innocent, happy childhood with wonderful parents and a wonderful family around me. At the age of 7 years old, my parents decided to send myself and my brother to a sleepaway camp in the Catskills in New York. We were a primarily Chabad family, but for whatever reason they chose to send me to a camp outside of the Chabad umbrella. It was a Orthodox Jewish boys sleepaway camp. And the first summer I went, I loved it. I had a great time. I stayed for 2 months, no problems. It was wonderful. The second summer I went, I had a traumatic experience that I believe has stayed with me my entire life, was unresolved, left unresolved in many ways, until recently, completely thanks to JCW. Before I went to camp, I had, thank God, a father that was very on edge about abuse, molestation. He had numerous talks with me before camp and said, if your counselors try to touch you inappropriately, if they tickle you, if they wrestle with you, anything like that, I want you to call your mother and I right away and let us know. And I knew I was a pretty mature 8-year-old. I knew what to look out for. I almost was on guard. In the summer of 1991, at 8 years old, my second summer in camp, my counselor made advances towards me. He took my hand and tried to place it on his privates. And I immediately pulled my hand back. And I actually, as a result of my father's discussions with me, I actually called him out on it. And I said to him, you know, I forget the exact words that I used, but I said something to him, something to the effect that made him realize I knew exactly what he was trying to do and that I wasn't okay with it. The counselor proceeded to physically beat the living daylights out of me, for lack of a better term. He kicked me, he punched me, threw me against the wall. He told me that if you ever tell your parents that I tried doing that to you, I will come to your house in the middle of the night and kill your parents in their sleep. As an 8-year-old kid, you tend to believe anything a 17, 18-year-old counselor says to you. So I took him at his word, and I kept my mouth shut, and I didn't say anything. Throughout the rest of the summer, I actually stayed for 2 months. I endured an incredible amount of emotional abuse and emotional trauma. I was a bedwetter until age 10. And before the summer, my father had tipped this counselor handsomely and said, my son wets his bed, so every night I need you, he does it just about every night, I'm going to need you to change his sheets. So instead of helping me, my counselor used that against me. What he did was he told me that wetting the bed was against camp regulations and that kids who wet the bed would be promptly thrown out of camp. And he basically said, if you ever tell anyone, on top of threatening to kill my parents, he told me if you ever tell anyone in the camp administration or your parents that I tried to do anything to you, or that I used to see him go sit on other kids' beds at night. It was bizarre, but he used to go sit on kids' beds, and I would sit there in my bed. He never tried messing with me again in that way, but again, I was scared to say anything. He said, if you ever tell anyone about any of this, I will let the camp head counselor know that you wet your bed, and they'll throw you out of camp in 2 seconds, and your parents will be so upset with you. So for an 8-week period, I wet my bed every single night, but I just slept in my wet sheets for fear of telling anyone to help me change my sheets, because I was worried that it would lead to, as he said, me being kicked out of camp, my parents being disappointed in me, et cetera, et cetera. Visiting day, I remember that summer my parents came to visit, and they stayed in, the camp gave them a little private bungalow to use for that Shabbos, and they stayed over the weekend. And I remember I slept in my bunk. I remember literally every moment they were there, I was like, I was sobbing into my pillow, wanting to tell them what I was going through, but deathly afraid to do so. At the end of the summer, I left camp. I told my parents I never wanted to go back. I didn't explain why. And about a year later, I remember I was sitting in shul on Shabbos with my brother. It was after shul, and my parents were in Kiddush. They were in the Kiddush in the shul social hall. And I don't know why, but I just told my brother everything. I kind of just completely broke down and told him, you know, this is what this guy tried to do to me, and et cetera, and this is what happened the whole summer. And my brother, a couple years older than me, ran and got my dad and got my mom and told them. My parents came in, and this was, keep in mind, this was now 1992, 93. This was kind of at a time when sexual abuse, emotional abuse, things like this weren't being addressed in any type of healthy way. They were being swept under the rug pretty much systematically. So my dad and my mom listened to my story. The rabbi of our shul at the time was actually the one who got us to go to that camp, and he was involved in that camp. He was there that whole summer. So my dad told him, I want you to speak to my son. My son has some very disturbing things to say. So I sat down with the rabbi. I told him what happened, and the rabbi then said he would speak to the camp administration, the camp officials, and discuss what had happened with this counselor. They spoke to the guy, and the guy, of course, denied it. You know, at the time he was probably 19, 20 years old. He flat out denied everything. He said maybe he was a little rough with me and played around, but nothing serious. Completely denied the whole thing, said I was totally out of my mind. And I remember when they came back and told me he was denying it, I remember how it hurt even more. It actually made me feel like the way I was feeling it was almost like being invalidated. And the rabbis sounded like they believed him over me. They kind of made me sound like a crazy little kid who was just starting trouble for no reason. And they did nothing. Not only did they do nothing, but the counselor was back at that camp as a counselor again for a number of years afterwards. I just had this anger, this tremendous amount of pain that I guess wasn't going away. And I thought, you know, maybe with time it'll go away. And it didn't. I got married at age 19, thank God, to a wonderful wife. I have 4 beautiful children. And it still didn't really go away. It still always gnawed at me and bothered me. But, you know, you get married, you have 4 kids, you have a great life. You stop, I don't want to say you stop thinking about it, but you certainly stop letting it bother you to a certain extent. In about, I don't know if it was 9 months ago, I'm not exactly sure how long ago, Sima Yarmush publicly started speaking. But my wife asked me to watch a video of Sima Yarmush talking about her experience. You know, the abuse that she endured at the hands of a trusted family friend. When I watched that video, it made me realize, here I am, I know this guy tried X, Y, and Z on me. I know that it looked like he perhaps had tried it on others in my bunk. And I'm sitting here quietly. This guy, I found him on Facebook, is married with 4 children. He has a son, a small son, looked like 6 years old maybe. I'm sure the son has friends come over to play. I'm sure he has sleepovers. And no one knows. His son's friends, parents don't know that they're sending their kid into a potentially very harmful situation. Who says he's not out there molesting people now? So after I watched Sima's video, I decided, and I spoke to my wife about it, and I said, I'm going to contact JCW, and I want to ensure that this guy is no longer a danger. I don't want to ruin anyone's life. I had no desire for revenge. There was no vengeance aspect of it. It was completely about wanting to make sure this individual is not out there ruining lives. So I contacted Mayor Seawald, who for the previous 12 months had pretty much been blowing me up, for lack of a better term, calling me nonstop, texting me nonstop. He wanted to meet with me, wanted to get me involved, wanted me to support the organization. And I loved everything about the organization. I just didn't want to personally get involved because I felt like it might open up, kind of reopen wounds that I didn't care to reopen. But I realize now that there was really no alternative, and this is what had to be done. I spoke to Mayor, I gave him all the information, and I then watched Mayor and JCW go to work in a way that I completely hadn't expected. I had heard from people that the JCW ruins people's lives, and they just, very irresponsibly sometimes post people's pictures up on the wall of shame, et cetera, et cetera. All complete hogwash. I watched Mayor contact this individual privately. He brought the allegations to the individual's attention, to the abuser's attention. At first, the abuser denied it, and I watched Mayor work his magic and literally get the guy within 10 minutes to admit to everything. Tearfully, crying, sobbing, admit to every last bit of it. And from his admission, you could tell that he'd been thinking about it for the past 23 years. He had not stopped thinking about it. I have no doubt about that based on, just hearing the way he broke down. The way in which JCW conducted themselves, I could use terms like grace, class, elegance, discretion. It was, all the things that you hear sometimes critics throw at them, that they're, irresponsible and they're needlessly aggressive, etc., just were completely proven to be totally false and baseless based on what I witnessed. After that, as you can imagine, it was before I continue, I will say it was an incredibly therapeutic experience for me to A, see that this person had admitted to everything, and B, at JCW's request, he penned a very meaningful 3 to 4 page apology to me for the pain and the suffering he had put me through. As a result of JCW's careful, thought-out approach, we were able to ensure that he was not a danger and that without ruining his life. But I can say that the experience I went through was incredibly, incredibly therapeutic. Receiving the apology I received, which was clearly sincere, was incredibly therapeutic. And knowing that I had prevented and ensured that other children wouldn't be abused by this person, by this individual, was incredibly satisfying and incredibly therapeutic. Sometimes people ask, I was recently asked a question when I was in Canada, what's my position on JCW? What do I think of JCW? What these people are doing every single day, the way they are stepping up to the plate and attacking this particular issue in a way that no one else has been willing to, is life-saving. It's crucial. It's something that without them, I can't even imagine how much more sexual abuse would be going on today in our schools, in our camps, if not for JCW. The sheer threat, just the threat of having them out there, I have no doubt deters a tremendous number of would-be offenders. My message to anyone watching is don't wait until this issue shows up at your doorstep, God forbid. There's no reason to wait. You want to create a secure environment for our children, for your children. Don't wait until you have a personal problem and you call them and you need their services. Don't wait until that moment to recognize that this organization needs your help, our help, everyone's help to survive. Getting involved now before you have a problem, a good offense is the best defense. And getting involved now before you have a problem is no doubt the smartest thing you could possibly do to ensure that your children are safe, in whether it's in their classroom, in their bunkhouse. If you were abused and you're embarrassed about it and you haven't discussed it with anyone, I would implore you, I would strongly recommend that you contact the JCW in a quiet and discreet way. You don't have to get on camera and talk about your experience the way I'm doing. It's not a requirement. This is something that I offered to do and was happy to do. If I can convince one more person, just one, to come forward and share their experience and prevent their abuser from abusing more people, then sitting down and publicly talking about my story is well worth it.